Time to talk about the Green Bay mother-loving Packers. Grossi Posse Packer Nation. Welcome to an episode of Podcast, a podcast where you don't have to be a Packers fan, but it sure does help. I'm your host, Tom. Yep, I can catch it lefty too, Grossi. And today, we're going to be trying to answer the age-old question. Will the Green Bay Packers be better? Have they improved from last season? And the way that we're going to do that, we're going to look at last season, take a look at where the Packers needed to improve, then take a look at free agency as well as the draft and see if they've addressed those areas, what areas could still be of need, and the expectations for the Packers heading into the 2025 NFL season. So, without further ado, let's break it down and start talking about last season. Because last season, for a lot of Packers fans, and including myself, there were higher expectations. The first season with Jordan Love as the starter was a little bit of a mixed bag. Of course, the lack of consistency was infuriating at times. The offensive line wasn't doing well. Jordan Love was throwing interceptions, but then, of course, got very, very hot at the end of the season, went on that tear, beat the Cowboys in the wild card round, and nearly knocked off the 49ers on the way to their playoff exit, which made me sad. And of course, it's the 49ers as always. So thanks, Santa Clara. But heading into this past season, there were higher expectations because, of course, Jordan Love played really well at the end of that season. There was a lot of excitement about our wide receivers who were young and promising with a ton of potential. And after last season, while they did have a better record, they still found themselves in the 7th seed, and they did lose to the eventual Super Bowl champions in the wild card round, the Philadelphia Eagles. And so while the Packers did improve on their record and had a couple more wins, ultimately they did not get further than they did in the 23-24 season. However, just because they didn't get back to the divisional round did not mean that last season was a failure, because there were some areas where they got much better in. Let's talk about the offensive side of the ball first. Talking about in passing, the Packers ranked 12th with 3,807 yards. Of course, Jordan Love getting hurt week 1 was not so great, but you had Malik Willis come in, win a few games, which was fantastic. And ultimately, the Packers, they were a top 15 offense in terms of passing the ball. Rushing, oh boy, the acquisition of Josh Jacobs and Xavier McKinney on the other side of the ball, but Josh Jacobs was revolutionary for the Packers as they ranked 5th with nearly 2,500 rushing yards last year. Josh Jacobs being a huge reason why that run game was so effective. And so the Packers had a balanced offensive attack, which really helped them in a lot of scenarios because they could just give the ball to Josh Jacobs. They can pound the rock, and how many times were we screwing at Matt LaFleur just to run the frickin' football? And in terms of points per game scored, they averaged 27.1 points per game, which was the 8th best in the league. So taking a look at these stats, they were a top 10 offense except for passing, where they were ranked 12th, which honestly is pretty damn good. As this team, we saw the potential, and when they put it all together, they were really good. But when they didn't, it was ugly and inconsistent. Now let's talk about the offensive line. Their pass block win rate was 67%, which ranked in the top 10 in the NFL. It ranked 7th. However, in terms of run blocking, they ranked 23rd with 71%. And so heading into this offseason, Goody made it a priority to actually improve this offense, not only in the draft, but also in free agency as well. Of course, the Packers did lose Josh Myers to free agency, our former center, and now, heading into this season, it looks like Elton Jenkins is going to get a shot at center. Those are all the rumors as of right now. But they did lose a piece on the offensive line that does need to be replaced. And protecting Jordan Love was on Goody's mind as he signed Aaron Banks. And then, of course, even with their second pick in the draft, they went and got Anthony Belton, who started at left tackle his entire career and never allowed more than 3 sacks a season. And this shouldn't be a huge surprise. Goody always loves having as many offensive linemen as possible. In addition, he already went high with offensive linemen and drafting Jordan Morgan in the first round, who really didn't have any play time last year, but he should be returning to the field this year healthy, and we're just going to be able to plug and play whichever 5 best offensive linemen are going to be able to take the field at any given time. On top of that, you do have Rasheed Walker and Zach Tom, who have contracts that are about to expire. Rasheed Walker, I imagine, is probably going to be leaving, but Zach Tom is one of the better O-linemen in the NFL and on the Packers, so I imagine they're going to keep him. But the point that I'm trying to make here is having a sturdy offensive line that actually has some depth is only going to benefit Jordan Love. We've seen at times when the offensive line has not been at its best and the offense just doesn't do well, which makes a whole lot of sense. But protecting your young quarterback, especially who they just committed $55 million to a year, seems to be a major priority. But of course, it's not just the offensive line, because the Green Bay Packers, they made plenty of waves, with 2 out of their first 3 picks in the draft being at wide receiver. Of course, going to get Matthew Golden to break the streak of 23 years of not drafting a first-round wide receiver. And there's a rationale for all of this. And again, we broke this down in the Matthew Golden video. But taking a look at upcoming contracts, you have Romeo Doubs, who there's some rumors going around and maybe he's going to get moved. I don't know if the Packers are actually going to do that. And Christian Watson, both of their contracts are going to be up after this season. On top of that, Christian Watson, he has to be able to take the field, which he's probably not going to see the field until November, maybe December, given that timetable. And Romeo Doubs, you do worry about concussion issues. And so the Packers this offseason are going to make sure that wide receiver is not going to be a problem in the upcoming years. On top of that, Jaden Reed and Dontavian Wicks, their contracts expire after the 2026 season. And so the Packers needed to make some moves at receiver. And of course, going to get Matthew Golden and Savion Williams is a way to do just that. And again, taking a look at the stats from last year, the only marker where they weren't top 10 was in the passing game. And so going to get O-linemen is definitely going to bolster that protection. And on top of that, giving Jordan Love more dynamic weapons to throw to. Matthew Golden, with his speed, he can play on the outside, potentially be that wide receiver one. Or Savion Williams, who's basically a larger Jaden Reed, he can play all over, and they've talked about making him a traditional wide receiver. I'm very curious how they're going to utilize him in that offense. But taking a look at just the offense, I don't think there's any way that this offense got worse. With the Packers wide receivers heading into last season, I mentioned before, there was a ton of potential and a lot of excitement that these guys were going to have a breakout year. Dontavian Wicks, he was a great route runner. You had Jaden Reed, who could be all over the field. Christian Watson, he could spread the field, and of course, he had insane speed. Romeo Doubs had those reliable hands. And unfortunately, a mix of injuries and drops kind of plagued the wide receiver room. And so because of that, they weren't really able to reach their full potential. Now, I'm not closing the door on any of those wide receivers right now, but I can completely understand Goody saying, hey, we need some depth here and also an injection of talent just in case some of these wide receivers don't work out. So on the offensive side of the ball, I think I can definitively say, yes, the Green Bay Packers should have improved. Not only the protection of Jordan Love by getting Anthony Belton and also getting Aaron Banks, but of course, adding 2 speedy wide receivers as well, which is just going to help in the passing game. And on top of that, I forgot to mention, Marshawn Lloyd also will be returning this year. Of course, we didn't see the rookie a whole lot last year because he had injury issues. And so if he's able to come back and make a splash almost immediately, that is only going to help an already dynamic running game with Josh Jacobs. Then let's talk about the defense, because this was a point of order where the Packers definitely improved in their run defense. However, their pass rush, their secondary, there are definitely some questions heading into the offseason, and even after the draft, there are still some lingering questions. Of course, the biggest question is Jaire Alexander. Is he staying? Is he going? Is he getting traded? Is his deal getting reworked? We don't know. I've heard every single rumor under the sun that he's coming back, that he's not coming back, and so unfortunately, we just have to wait and see. And talking about our secondary, it seems like the way that the Packers address free agency and also the draft, it just seems to strongly indicate that either they're really okay with who the Packers have at corner, or Jaire Alexander is going to be coming back. Because in free agency, of course, they lost Eric Stokes, the speedy corner, who I would have loved to see him work out. I loved him his rookie year, but he went over to the Raiders, and instead from the Raiders, we got Nate Hobbs, who has also dealt with some injury issues, but definitely shows some potential here. But besides that, the only other DB that they got in the draft is the guy that I announced, and that was Micah Robinson from Tulane. And while we do have 7th round starters in that secondary, I have to imagine that Jaire Alexander is more likely to come back than not. Maybe I'm completely misreading this situation, but it just doesn't seem like the Packers addressed one of their biggest needs if Jaire Alexander was to walk away. So there's still questions there. Goody did revamp that safety room last year, not only getting Javon Bullard, but of course bringing in Xavier McKinney, and he really made a huge impact in that secondary. Then with the other acquisitions in free agency, they brought in Isaiah Simmons, a former top 10 draft pick. He of course was with the Cardinals for a bit, then he went over to the Giants, and while he's insanely athletic, I'm not going to say that moves the needle at all. I would love to see what Jeff Hafley can do with him. Maybe he can contribute in special teams like he has done in the past for other squads, but I'm not going to have that move the meter and say that's made the Packers better until I actually see him on the field and how much he's actually going to contribute. And so finishing up talking about the secondary, because we just have to wait and see about Jaire Alexander, last year the Green Bay Packers ranked 13th in their passing defense, and so they were still pretty darn good. And what the Packers were able to do with that secondary, especially with that revamped safety unit, was really damn impressive. They ranked 3rd in turnover differential in the league. They were plus 12. That defense had 17 interceptions and 14 fumble recoveries, which is pretty damn good, and one of the major reasons why the Packers Packers were able to win some of those close games. But of course, we're not just talking about the passing defense and talking about the run defense, which has been a plague for Packers fans forever. The Packers, and this is not a typo, finally finished as a top 10 run defense. They finished 7th in the league, and this just feels like a breath of fresh air, because while the defense definitely had some issues last year, to say that they didn't improve in the run defense would be a complete bold-faced lie. And the fact that Jeff Hafley's talking about adaptability and still needing to evolve and get better, it just sounds so good after many defensive coordinators didn't do just that. And in terms of points per game allowed, the Packers were 6th best in the league. So again, they were not only top 10 in offense besides passing, but they were top 10 in defense in both rushing and also points per game allowed. So pretty darn good overall. However, where were the issues last year on defense? And that comes down to the pass rush. Of course, the Packers going and get Lucas Van Ness. He has not developed as quickly as the Packers would have liked. He was a very raw talent when they drafted him. Rashawn Gary, who had a pretty good season last year and was still able to have a pretty good win rate, was not able to get after the quarterback as much as Packers fans would have liked. And overall, while the Packers did finish in the top 10, they tied 8th with the Giants and the Seahawks with 45 sacks. Their pass rush win rate was abysmal. It was 35%, which ranked 26th in the league, as opposed to their run stop win rate where they ranked 6th in the league. So a massive improvement for the run defense, not so good for getting after the quarterback and providing some pressure. And for the Packers, this was the first time since the 2020 NFL draft that they went back-to-back-to-back offensive players with their first 3 picks. And so, as I mentioned before, for the offense, you see definite improvement not only in the receiving game, but also in protecting Jordan Love. But I was scratching my head a little bit going, are we going to address the secondary, especially corner, or are we going to go get another pass rusher? And that's what day 3 was for. The Packers drafted Barron Sorrell, which provided a fantastic draft moment. His best season was last year with 11 tackles for a loss and 6 sacks. Then they went with another edge rusher in Colin Oliver, who had his best season in 2023. He went from a defensive end to an outside linebacker, had 15.5 tackles for a loss in 2023. Unfortunately, last year, his season got ended prematurely because of a foot injury. And so the hope is that if he's able to recover, he could at least be a rotational piece there at outside linebacker. Then with their next pick, they went defensive tackle with Warren Brinson, who had 6 tackles for a loss and 2 sacks in 2024. And taking a look at Kenny Clark, who is getting a little bit older, and I will always love Kenny Clark. I mean, for the years, the Packers needed to get another guy on the defensive line next to Kenny Clark to provide some pressure to stop the run. And again, while their run defense was really good last year, those issues still remain the same. And so heading into the season, while I can say that the offense, I think, definitely got better, the defense is where I still have the most amount of questions. This is kind of a make or break it year for Lucas Van Ness, and if he's able to develop, again, he has the athletic ability, which it would be phenomenal and a great upgrade to this pass rush, but that's a huge question mark. On top of that, is Rashawn Gary going to be able to get after the quarterback as consistently? Because we gave him a whole lot of money, and I love Rashawn Gary. And it just seems like the Packers over the years have gone and got these athletic guys who have been really, really raw heading into the NFL, but you're drafting based off potential, and sometimes that development just does not follow. Rashawn Gary got that big-time contract and can still get after the quarterback. Now we need Lucas Van Ness to do the same. And so with the Packers going all in on defense, besides John Williams, their very last pick on day 3, it is a little bit of a risk here, and it's very difficult to say, did the defense get better? Edgerrin Cooper apparently put on a bunch of weight, and I'm very excited to see him play for his second season. He's been phenomenal. Quay Walker, I'm hoping for a breakout year from him as he's going to be in a contract year as well. Can guys like Devontae Wyatt step up? He just got his 5th-year extension. And overall, this is where the biggest concern is getting after the quarterback for me. There is Trey Hendrickson, who's still out there and apparently not really talking to the Bengals. And while I was kind of against it heading into the draft because I didn't want Goody to give up those picks, this might be the time to do so. I still don't know if Goody's going to give up that draft capital to the Bengals and also sign him to a major contract, but I think everyone could agree that Trey Hendrickson would be a major upgrade and be a veteran presence, especially as guys like Lucas Van Ness are trying to develop. So ultimately, if Jair Alexander winds up leaving or is traded, I don't think that secondary has gotten better. I'm sure McKinney and Bullard can hold it down, and I really do like Carrington Valentine. It's not a knock on what we have at all. However, I do think we need a true CB1 back there, preferably with some veteran experience, but ultimately, that concerns me a little bit, and of course, the pass rush. We're relying on guys to develop, and on top of that, we are going with day 3 picks who can always be hit or miss. And so ultimately, I don't know if the defense has improved. I'm very excited to see what Hafley is going to do. But that is the only concern that I have heading into this season, where the Packers may have not gotten better, because it's going to be determined on if these guys are going to be able to develop. And so ultimately, I have really high hopes for this Packers offense. Jordan Love coming into his third year as a starter. I'm excited to see if his consistency can be even better, because we all know that he has the arm talent, he has the accuracy, he just has to work on not throwing so many interceptions. But on top of that, getting more protection and giving Jordan Love more time, opening up more running lanes for Josh Jacobs, who had a phenomenal year, Marshawn Lloyd being able to contribute. I'm really excited for the explosiveness of this offense. Just with Savion Williams and Matthew Golden, pair them with all the receivers that we have, it should make that entire wide receiver room better, because everybody gets better with competition, and there's just so many different ways that they can utilize Golden and Williams in an already pretty dynamic offense. As for the defense, I just pray that run defense continues to be really damn good, and overall, their defense wasn't bad last year. However, to get over the hump, that pass rush has to be better, and for that, it's unfortunately just going to be wait and see. But let me know what you think down in the comments below. Do you think the Green Bay Packers got better for the 2025 NFL season? Let me know. You guys find me at TomGrossiComedy.com or Tom Grossi Comedy, all social media, see down below. A big shout and thank you to all the Patreon and YouTube members for supporting this channel, and thank you so much for watching. I'm Tom Grossi, and as always, go Pack Go.